Have you ever walked into your own home and felt like a stranger, that strange, hollow silence where every corner feels familiar, but wrong? That's what happened the day I came back from the hospital. Just 2 nights, that's all I'd been gone. 2 short nights of fluorescent lights, white walls, and nurses who spoke too softly, as if volume alone could break my bones. I was tired, aching, but relieved. I kept thinking about my room, the soft mattress, the smell of lavender from the old pillowcase, the quilt I'd sewn myself after Harold passed away. Home, that's all I wanted. I still remember the way the doorknob felt in my palm, cold, steady, safe. I pushed the door open and nothing for a moment. I thought I'd walked into the wrong room. My eyes blinked fast, trying to understand, but no, it was mine. The same window, the same faded curtains, only everything else was gone, the bed. The nightstands, my old rocking chair, even my lamp. Gone. The room looked stripped, like someone had peeled my life off the walls and left only the bones. I froze. Literally. My breath stuck halfway in my throat, my purse still hanging on my shoulder, footsteps behind me. Alana, I knew her walk, heels sharp, confident, like someone who always wanted to be heard before she arrived. "Oh, you're back," she said, her tone sugar-coated. What happened to my room?" My voice didn't even sound like mine. She smiled a little too easily. "We needed the space. You don't need privacy, Mom. You spend most of your time in the living room anyway." I blinked. "Privacy," I repeated. "You sold my furniture." Before she could answer, Greg appeared in the doorway, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when guilt tried to whisper in his ear. "Mom, please don't make a big deal. We just thought it was time for a change. The old bed wasn't good for your back. You're better off sleeping on something firmer. You'll thank us later." Ha ha ha, thank them. My lips parted but no sound came out. I wanted to laugh, but it wasn't funny. It was that kind of broken laugh that never makes it past your throat. My eyes darted to the empty spot where Harold's rocking chair used to be. The one he fixed 3 times even after it broke. "Where's the chair?" I whispered. "Oh," Alana said with a little shrug. "We threw it out. It was too old." Kind of depressing, honestly. Her words hit harder than any slap could. Depressing. That chair held 40 years of love, arguments, late-night talks, and morning tea. I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. "And the quilt, oh, that old thing, we figured it was worn out, probably full of dust." "That's what my memories were to her." Greg sighed. "Mom, listen, you're 74, you shouldn't be worrying about all this stuff. You need simplicity, less clutter. We're just making things efficient." Efficient, the word stung. My life wasn't clutter, it was history. I looked at them, both standing in my doorway like landlords explaining renovations to a tenant. My son, my only boy, the one I raised, taught to tie his shoes, the one I thought would protect me when I grew old. And his wife, polished and pretty, already scrolling through her phone as if I were a distraction. Something in me cracked, not loudly but quietly like wood under pressure. I walked into the middle of that hollow room. My shoes echoed against the floor. I placed my hand on the wall, tracing the faint outline of the rug that once sat there. I could almost feel Harold's voice, the way he used to say, "A woman who works as hard as you deserves a bed that doesn't argue." My throat tightened. "You should rest in the guest room," Greg said softly. "The sofa's fine for now. You don't need all this comfort." Comfort, he said it like a luxury. I smiled, but my smile wasn't kind. "Comfort isn't a privilege," I said quietly. "It's what makes a home feel like home." He didn't respond, just looked away, maybe ashamed, maybe not. I took one last glance around that empty space. Every missing item felt like a missing part of me. And in that moment I understood something. Silence wasn't weakness. Silence could be power if you used it right, so I stood there still, calm, quiet, let them believe I was fragile. Let them think I'd bend, because sometimes when you've been underestimated long enough, silence becomes your sharpest weapon. Alana tapped her heels impatiently. "We really should get going, Greg. Dinner reservations." Greg hesitated. "Mom, don't be upset, okay? We're trying to help. Help, if that's what help looked like." I wondered what betrayal would feel like when they left. I stayed there. Alone, the walls looked wider, emptier. The air felt cold against my skin. I wanted to cry, but no tears came, just a long sigh that felt like it had been building for years. You know that feeling when grief doesn't come out as tears but as stillness? That was me. Just breathing in an empty room that used to be mine. For years, I'd kept peace in this house, biting my tongue, smoothing things over, letting small wrongs slide. But tonight, something different was happening inside me, something steady. Something dangerous, because they thought they were simplifying my life, but what they were really doing was reminding me whose house this truly was. I stepped out of the room, closing the door gently behind me. The latch clicked, a soft sound, but it echoed in my chest like a promise. They thought silence meant surrender, but they were wrong. They thought they'd taken my comfort. They didn't know they'd just woken up my courage. You ever notice how silence sounds different at night? During the day, it's just quiet. But at night, it's louder. It crawls under your skin. It whispers what you don't want to hear. That night, lying on that narrow sofa in the guest room, I felt every inch of that silence. The cushions were stiff, the blanket thin. My hip bones pressed against the edge, and every turn made the springs creak in protest. Awe, I winced, trying to find a soft spot that didn't exist. I stared at the ceiling. The light from the hallway slipped through the crack of the door, thin, crooked, almost hesitant, like it was afraid to enter. The house didn't sound like my house anymore. It sounded occupied somewhere down the hall. I heard Alana's laugh, high, polished, almost perfect. Then Greg's voice, low and comfortable, the way people sound when they believe the night belongs to them. They were laughing. In my house after selling my bed, ha ha ha. I actually let out a small laugh of disbelief. Unbelievable, I whispered, but the laugh turned into a sigh, and that sigh turned into something else, a dull ache. Deep in the chest I thought of Harold. He used to hum at night, that soft tune that didn't have a name. Sometimes he'd rock in his chair until I fell asleep. The house used to breathe differently when he was around, slow, calm, steady. After he died, the silence became my companion. Not loneliness, not emptiness, just quiet understanding. But this new silence, this wasn't peace. This was invasion. I turned on my side, staring at the wall. My eyes burned, but no tears came. Not yet. You can't cry when your pride is still standing. I tried to close my eyes. But sleep doesn't visit easily when your heart's busy replaying voices. You don't need privacy. You're too old for comfort. We're helping you. Each word repeated in my mind over and over, until it stopped sounding like words and started sounding like rules. Rules for being old. Do you know how it feels when your own children start talking to you like you're a burden they inherited? It's the kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just sits there, heavy. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. The fabric smelled new, not fresh new, just not mine. New. Everything around me had been replaced, my furniture, my freedom, my place. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I saw Harold again. Sitting in his chair, reading the newspaper, his voice echoing faintly in my head. Promise me you'll never hand away what we built. And I had, piece by piece, quietly, out of love, out of guilt. Out of habit I whispered into the dark, I'm sorry, Harold. Then I laughed softly, the kind of broken laugh that comes after too much silence. Ha ha ha, look at me, talking to ghosts. The blanket slipped off, the air bit my neck, and I sighed again. You ever sigh so deep it feels like your soul's exhaling too? That was me. Right there, I sat up slowly. My back ached, my knees protested, but my mind, oh, my mind was wide awake. Something about humiliation has a strange effect. It sharpens you. I wasn't angry yet. Anger is loud. This was quieter, the kind of quiet that plans. I stood, bare feet touching the cold floor. The air smelled different now, new paint, air freshener, the faint scent of Alana's perfume that clung to everything she touched. I walked toward the hallway. The house looked bigger, somehow emptier, like it was waiting for me to claim it back. I peeked toward my old room. Moonlight poured across the floor like silver water. The room looked hollow, like it was missing a heartbeat. I stepped closer, the floor creaked. My heart followed. I stopped at the doorway. The moonlight hit the spot where my bed used to be. That faint rectangle on the carpet, a ghost of what once stood there. I knelt down slowly, my knees groaning in protest. My fingers brushed that cold patch of floor. I whispered, you remember me, don't you? Silly, maybe. But homes remember. They remember who built them, who cried in them, who kept them alive, and maybe that's when the first tear came. Just one, hot, quiet, fast. It fell on the floor, right where my bed once stood. I wiped it away, smiling at myself. All right, that's enough, I murmured. No more crying over people who don't care. I stood up, holding onto the windowsill for balance. The wood felt steady, real, and suddenly I knew if I didn't do something soon, this house would forget me too, because that's what happens when you let others speak louder than you do. You start fading. I walked back to the sofa, sat down, and stared at the ceiling again. This time, the silence didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like an ally. All right, I whispered into the dark. If they think I'm weak, let them. My lips curved into the smallest, calmest smile. They'll learn. I lay back, my mind already turning, slow, deliberate, calculating. They had their plans. Now I had mine. If this story reminds you of someone who lost their place in their own home, hit that subscribe button. Because some stories aren't just stories, they're lessons we've lived. By the time the clock struck midnight, I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that empty room. No, she was gone. What was left was someone older, yes, but sharper, someone who'd learned that silence isn't surrender. It's preparation. As I drifted into half-sleep, I thought of one thing. They believed they'd simplified my life. They had no idea they'd just simplified my decision. Because when morning comes, I won't be their quiet mother anymore. I'll be the woman they shouldn't have underestimated. Morning light has a strange way of exposing the truth. It slips through curtains, quietly revealing what the night tried to hide. When I woke up, my back hurt, my neck stiff, but my mind was sharper than ever. The house was quiet, too quiet, that fake kind of peace that sits on top of tension like a rug over a cracked floor. I stood slowly, sighing. "Aw, this sofa's going to turn my bones into bricks," I muttered, half laughing to myself. Ha ha ha, even my laugh sounded old in the silence. I shuffled into the kitchen. The kettle took forever to whistle. Its sound used to be sharp, now it coughed like it had caught my age too. I leaned on the counter, looking at the window, watching the morning light stretch across the sink. It hit the photo frame beside it, Harold, smiling, sunburned, standing in front of this very house the day we bought it. "You said this place would outlive us both," I whispered. Guess you were right, but you forgot to warn me what happens when the people inside forget who built it. The kettle squeaked. I poured the tea and reached for my old leather notebook. Harold and I used to call it our life book. Bills, passwords, small notes, grocery lists, everything was in there. A habit I never let go of. I flipped through the pages, slow and steady. Electricity bills, property tax. Then something caught my eye, a small pile of printed bank statements tucked between the pages, not in my handwriting, Greg's. My chest tightened. What's this? I murmured. The paper smelled new, unfamiliar. I scanned the numbers, and there it was: transfers monthly $450, household expenses $380, family groceries $600, utilities overflow, then another one $275, car maintenance, and then, like a slap, $1,000 marked temporary family loan. My hands trembled slightly, the teaspoon clinking against the cup. I whispered, half to myself, half to Harold, "You see this, love? They didn't just take my room, they've been taking my money too." I flipped through more pages, more transfers. Regular, quiet, disguised as care. My name, my account, their convenience. 4 months, maybe years, I'd been paying for their life. Their groceries, their car, even their dog's grooming. The realization didn't come with shouting. It came with stillness, that deep, cold kind of stillness that's more dangerous than rage. I sat down slowly. My back protested, but my resolve didn't. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought age meant blindness. I took a deep breath. My heart wasn't racing, it was steady. "All right," I whispered, "let's fix this." I picked up my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found one I hadn't used in years: Sandra, my bank's branch manager. Harold always said, "Know the name of the person who guards your money." I'd laughed at that once. Not today. The phone rang twice. "Good morning, this is Sandra speaking." "Hello, dear, this is Mary Ellen Harper." My voice was calm, polite, but not soft. "I'd like to check on some recurring transfers from my account." "Of course, Mrs. Harper, give me just a moment." I heard the faint clicking of a keyboard, then her voice came back, careful. "Yes, I see a few automatic debits, mostly linked to household payments and 2 additional personal accounts. Would you like to review them all?" "Yes," I said firmly, "and I'd like every single one of them stopped, effective immediately." There was a short pause, surprise, not judgment. "All of them, ma'am." "Yes, every single one." Another few clicks. "Done. Nothing else will go out today." "Thank you, Sandra." "You're very welcome, Mrs. Harper. Would you like to come in for a review?" "Not yet," I replied. "For now, I just need the silence back in my finances." When I hung up, I let out a long sigh of relief, that slow, trembling kind of sigh that feels like release. The room felt different. Lighter. For the first time in days, I felt in control. I picked up the notebook again and ran my fingers across the worn leather cover. "You always said never to hand away my strength, Harold," I whispered. "Guess it's time I start listening." Footsteps echoed down the hallway, Greg's voice groggy. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, walking in, rubbing his eyes. "Sleep okay?" I smiled faintly. "Oh, I slept just fine," he nodded, reaching for the fridge. "We're running low on groceries. I'll send you the list later, okay?" I didn't answer. Instead, I slid the notebook onto the table, letting the papers peek out just enough for him to see. He froze. "What's that?" "Oh," I said softly, "just your little project, the one where I accidentally fund your life." His face shifted, guilt first, then defense. "Mom, it's not like that. Those are just household expenses." "Household," I repeated, my tone still calm. "Funny, because I don't remember eating half of what I've been paying for." He laughed nervously. "Come on, Mom, don't be dramatic." Ha ha ha. I let out a small laugh, the kind that isn't laughter at all. "I'm 74, Greg. I've earned the right to be dramatic." He tried to smile. "You know we always pay you back when things stabilize." I leaned back, tilting my head. "And when exactly does stability visit this house, Greg?" He sighed. "You're overthinking it." "No," I said quietly. "I'm just not thinking." The room went quiet. The kind of silence that sits heavy between two people who suddenly see each other differently. He cleared his throat. "Anyway, I'll be working from home today." "Of course you will," I murmured. He left the kitchen, muttering something under his breath. I stayed seated, staring at the empty doorway, listening to the echo of my own calm. You know what that moment felt like. Like waking up from a long nap you didn't know you were taking. Every little lie, every small manipulation, every "we're doing this for your own good." They all started lining up in my head. They thought they were clever. They thought they were safe, but they'd forgotten something very simple. This house, this life is in my name. If this story feels too real to ignore, hit subscribe, because the next part isn't just payback, it's about reclaiming respect. I stood, poured the rest of my tea down the sink, and wiped the counter clean. The sponge squeaked softly, almost like a sigh. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake, and awake women, especially old ones, are dangerous. I looked toward the hallway where Greg had disappeared. "They took my comfort," I whispered. "Now I'll take back control. Because they didn't just steal my things, they stole my trust. And soon, they'll learn what it costs to lose both." You ever notice how some people can lie so calmly, they actually start believing it? That morning, Greg was one of those people. By noon, I had already gone through every piece of paper in that old notebook, Every transfer, every transaction, every quiet theft dressed as help. The more I read, the quieter I became. Funny, isn't it? The quieter a woman gets, the more dangerous she becomes. I brewed another cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. The clock ticked like it was counting down to something. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Alana had probably just finished wiping the counters, humming like a woman proud of a house she didn't own. When Greg finally walked in, his laptop under his arm, he gave me that same casual smile, the one he used whenever he thought charm could cover guilt. "Hey Mom, you look serious." "Everything okay?" I looked up slowly. "Greg," I said softly, "we need to talk." He froze, that nervous twitch flickering in his jaw. "About what?" I slid the notebook toward him. The papers fanned out across the table like evidence in a courtroom. "About this," I said. He stared at them, then at me. His smile faltered. "Mom, I told you, those are just household payments." "Yes," I said, nodding slowly. "Household, which one though? Because I seem to be paying for a household that doesn't look much like mine." He laughed, that awkward kind of laugh that tries to dismiss things before they get serious. "Ha ha ha, Mom, you're making it sound worse than it is." I didn't laugh, not even a little. "Worse than it is?" I repeated. "You took money from my account, Greg, without permission. You said it was temporary." "Temporary's been 2 years." He rubbed his neck, sighing. "Mom, come on, you know how hard things have been. We've had bills, Alana's courses, the car." "Car," I interrupted. "Yes, I saw that. You bought a car." "Using my money." He looked down, shame flickering in his eyes, but only for a second. "We were going to pay you back." "When?" I asked. "After you sold the rest of the house." Silence. The kind that cuts more than shouting ever could. Just then, Alana walked in, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. "What's going on here?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes already defensive. "Oh, nothing," I said, forcing a small smile. "Just a little math lesson." She glanced at the papers and her expression tightened. "Mary Ellen, if this is about those transfers we explained—" "You explained nothing," I interrupted. "You both decided for me. You took my money, my furniture, and my privacy, and you called it care." Alana laughed softly, in that patronizing way people do when they think they're talking to someone confused. "You're overreacting. We've been helping you live simpler." "Simple," I said, leaning forward, "isn't the same as small." She blinked. "Excuse me," I smiled. "You've been trying to shrink me, dear, piece by piece. First my room, then my money, now my dignity." "But you see," I paused, letting the silence stretch, "some of us don't shrink that easily." Greg ran a hand over his face. "Mom, please don't turn this into a fight. We're trying to make this work for everyone." "For everyone," I repeated. "Except me," he sighed, sitting across from me. "You're emotional, Mom, I get it. You've been through a lot lately." That word again. "Emotional people use it when they want to discredit what you feel without listening to why you feel it." I smiled faintly. "Greg, I've been called many things in my life, stubborn, strict, old-fashioned, but emotional." I chuckled softly. "No, dear, what I am is awake." He frowned, confused. I took a sip of tea, steady and slow. "Do you know what I did this morning?" "What?" I called the bank. His face went pale. "You what?" I stopped every transfer. Every automatic payment, every household expense you've been pulling from my account, effective immediately. His jaw dropped slightly. "Mom," Alana's voice rose behind him, sharp and shrill. "You can't do that. Everything runs through that account." "Oh, it did," I said gently. "Not anymore," she scoffed. "You're sabotaging us. You don't understand how hard it is to manage this house." "Manage," I smiled. "I managed this home for 40 years before you two ever set foot in it, and I did it without stealing from anyone." Her cheeks flushed red. "You're being cruel." "No," I said quietly. "I'm being clear." The room went still. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. Greg leaned forward, his tone softening like a peace offering. "Mom, you don't have to do this. We're family." "Yes," I said, "and family doesn't sell your bed while you're in a hospital." That landed. He flinched. Alana folded her arms. "You're acting like we're villains." I met her gaze. "And you're acting like victims." Neither spoke. The air between us thickened. You could feel the truth sitting there, heavy and uninvited. Finally, Greg sighed. "So what now? You want us to move out?" I tilted my head. "Do you think I'd answer that today?" He frowned. "Then what are you going to do?" I smiled. "Exactly what you've been doing, making decisions. Only now they'll be mine." I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly. The wooden legs scraped the floor, a small, steady sound that somehow felt like thunder. As I reached the doorway, I paused and looked back at them. "You both should rest," I said softly. "You'll need it." Greg's voice broke the silence. "Mom, what's that supposed to mean?" I turned slightly, meeting his eyes with the calmest smile I'd worn in years. "You'll find out soon enough. If you're still here, you already feel it, that shift when silence becomes power." Subscribe for the next part, because what happens next isn't revenge, it's justice. I left them sitting there, her pretending to be insulted, him pretending to be in control, but both of them looked a smaller dot in the hallway. I exhaled slowly. The kind of breath that empties your lungs and fills your courage at the same time. For years, I thought peace meant avoiding conflict. Now I understood peace sometimes comes dressed as confrontation. They thought they'd cornered me, but they'd only reminded me where the walls were and how strong they still are. They thought I was finished arguing. But I hadn't even started fighting quietly. You ever have that moment when you realize you've been silent for so long your own voice almost surprises you? That was me the next morning. Sitting by the window, tea in hand, watching sunlight touch the same yard I'd swept for 40 years. Everything looked the same and yet nothing felt the same. The teacup rattled just slightly against the saucer. My hands weren't trembling out of fear but from something stronger, resolve I'd spent the night thinking. Thinking about the empty room, the money, the laughter that didn't include me. And somewhere between midnight and dawn I decided, no more speeches, no more begging to be respected. When people stop listening, you stop talking, you start acting. So after breakfast I put on my gray coat, slipped my purse over my shoulder and stepped outside. The air was crisp, biting just enough to wake me up fully. The house behind me looked peaceful. Peaceful, ha ha ha. What a lie, the law office was just 4 blocks away, sandwiched between the library and the pharmacy. I'd passed it hundreds of times without ever needing to walk in. Today I did. The receptionist, a young woman, maybe in her 20s, smiled politely. "Good morning, ma'am, how can I help you?" Her kindness almost startled me. It had been a while since someone spoke to me like I still mattered. "I'd like to talk to someone about property rights," I said, "and family occupancy." Her eyes flickered with understanding, not pity, understanding. "Of course, ma'am. We have someone available in 10 minutes. Please have a seat." So I sat. 10 minutes. 10 quiet, deliberate minutes of watching people go in and out, carrying folders, papers, purpose. And for the first time in a long time, I felt I was about to carry purpose too. When they called my name, "Mrs. Harper," I stood up straight. My knees cracked, but even they seemed to agree it was time. Inside the small office sat a man in his late 50s, hair silver at the edges, kind eyes behind thin glasses. The nameplate said J. Howard. He looked up and smiled, not the polite kind, the real kind. "Good morning, Mrs. Harper. What brings you in today?" I sat down across from him. The leather chair squeaked softly, as if even it was curious. "I own a home," I began slowly, choosing each word carefully. "It's in my name. My son and his wife live with me. I let them stay temporarily. Now they've started making decisions without me." He didn't interrupt. He just nodded, listening like a man who'd heard too many unspoken stories behind simple words. "They sold my bedroom furniture," I continued, "without asking. Used my money, made changes I didn't approve, and they said I don't need privacy." The words trembled on the way out, but once they left my mouth I didn't feel small. I felt lighter. Mr. Howard leaned forward slightly. "Do they contribute financially to the mortgage, taxes, or bills?" "No," I said. "I pay for everything. The house was paid off years ago." He nodded. "Then legally they're not co-owners, they're occupants, guests, technically, guests." That word hit me right in the chest. "So they have no legal right to alter or sell your property without consent," he continued. "If they did, that's a violation of your property rights." I blinked. "Violation," I repeated softly. "It's strange hearing it put that way." "It's not strange," he said gently. "It's the truth." He pulled out a folder and placed a few documents in front of me. "You have options. You can start by reestablishing verbal boundaries, but from what you've described, I doubt that'll hold. The stronger option is a written notice requiring them to vacate the property within 30 days. 30 days, I let that number sit in the air for a second, breathing it in like oxygen. "And if they refuse?" I asked quietly. He met my eyes. "They can't, not legally. You're the owner, you hold the deed, you hold the power." I looked down at my hands, folded neatly in my lap. For the first time in years, they didn't look fragile to me, they looked capable. He continued, "If you'd like, I can prepare the formal notice for you this afternoon." I nodded slowly. "Yes, please, I think I'll need that." He smiled slightly. "You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Harper. Protecting your home isn't selfish, it's self-respect." Self-respect, I'd given that word away too many times to count. While he typed, the sound of his keyboard filled the room, sharp, precise. It almost sounded like a heartbeat. I sat there, hands on my purse, feeling something awaken inside me, not anger, not revenge, just balance. After a few minutes, he slid a crisp document across the desk. My name sat at the top, bold, steady, Mary Ellen Harper, not Greg's, not Alana's, mine. He pointed at the signature line. "Once you sign here, this becomes your formal 30-day notice." I picked up the pen. My hand hovered for a moment. I could almost hear Harold's voice in the back of my mind. "Promise me you'll never hand away what we built." My lips curved into a quiet smile. "I kept that promise, Harold. Just took me a while to remember it." Then I signed. When I finished, Mr. Howard looked at me with a mix of admiration and understanding. "You're not the first woman who's had to do this," he said softly. "But you might be one of the few who did it before it was too late." I nodded, slipping the papers into my purse. "Thank you, Mr. Howard." He stood as I did. "You'll be fine, Mrs. Harper. You sound like someone who's already halfway free." Outside, the air hit my face again, cool, clear, alive. The sunlight seemed brighter than before. The world hadn't changed, but I walked back home, my steps slow but sure. The envelope in my purse felt heavy, but it wasn't a burden. It was proof. Proof that I was no longer the woman who stood frozen in an empty room. If you've ever been told you're too old, too quiet, or too late to take your power back, subscribe. Because stories like this prove it's never too late to reclaim your name. When I reached my porch, I paused, hand on the railing Harold built himself decades ago. I looked at the house not with sadness this time, but with quiet determination they'd see this envelope soon enough. And when they did, they'd finally understand something I should have taught them years ago: love doesn't mean surrender. They thought they owned the house because I let them live in it. Soon they'll realize they were only guests waiting for their checkout date. Evening always exposes the truth better than daylight. It's when people relax, their masks loosen, and their arrogance breathes easy. That's why I waited until the evening. All day, the house had been pretending to be calm. Greg working in the living room with his laptop like he owned the space. Alana arranging decorative pillows as if they could cover guilt. The smell of pasta sauce drifted through the air, fake domestic peace in a house built on disrespect. And in my purse the envelope weighted thin but heavy. I sat at the table, stirring my tea, watching the clock tick past 6. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, like it had made peace with what came next. You ever feel that strange mix of sadness and power at the same time? That's exactly what it felt like, knowing you're about to reclaim what's yours, but also realizing how far people had to fall for you to take that step. Alana was the first to break the calm. "Mary Ellen," she called from the kitchen, too sweetly. "I'm making dinner tonight, something light for your stomach. You must be tired." I smiled faintly. "Not tired at all." "Oh good," she said, stirring the pot with that fake grace of hers. "Change can be hard at your age, but you'll adjust." I almost laughed. Ha ha ha, adjust. I had adjusted so many times I'd become an expert in disappearing politely. "Not anymore." Greg walked in then, loosening his tie. "Mom," he said, trying for a soft tone, "about yesterday." I raised a hand slightly. "Don't worry, I understand everything now." He smiled, relieved. "Poor boy, see. I knew you'd calm down." I let him believe that for a moment, then I said, "I have something for you both." They paused. Alana turned down the stove. Greg frowned, cautious. I reached into my purse, pulled out the crisp envelope, and placed it gently on the counter between us. "What's this?" Greg asked. "Read it," I said softly. He hesitated, then tore it open. His eyes moved quickly across the paper. Once, twice, then slower, as if the words refused to change no matter how much he reread them. Finally he looked up. His voice cracked a little. "What is this supposed to be?" "A formal notice," I said. "You have 30 days to vacate my house." Alana blinked, her spoon clattering against the pot. "You're evicting us?" she asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. I tilted my head slightly. "No, dear, I'm simply asking guests to leave after overstaying their welcome." Greg's jaw tightened. "Mom, this is insane. We live here." I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever. "No, Greg, you stay here. You live off my income in my home under the illusion that I won't notice. That illusion ends today." He rubbed his temples. "You can't just throw us out. We're family." "Yes," I said quietly, "family. The same family that sold my bed while I was in the hospital. The same family that decided I don't need privacy. Tell me, Greg, which part of that looks like love to you?" He looked away. Silence pressed down like a weight. Alana finally found her voice. "You're overreacting," she snapped. "We were organizing your life. You should be thanking us. We've made this home better." "Better for whom?" I asked. "Because I don't recall asking to live like a stranger in my own house." Her cheeks flushed. "You don't know how hard we've worked to keep things running." I smiled gently. "Oh, I know exactly how hard you've worked to make me smaller." Greg's voice grew louder now, anger replacing guilt. "You're being unfair. We were trying to help you. You can't do this." I stood slowly, resting both hands on the counter. My voice dropped low, steady, certain. "Greg, I already did." The only sound in the kitchen was the slow simmer of the sauce on the stove. For a second, I almost felt pity. Almost, then I remembered the empty room, the cold floor. The quilt they threw away, the nights I lay awake on that stiff sofa, wondering how my own child could forget I was still alive, and that pity disappeared. Alana crossed her arms tightly. "We'll talk to a lawyer," I chuckled softly. "Please do. Mine will be expecting your call." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Greg just stared at me, eyes wide, confused, almost childlike. "Mom, this isn't you," he whispered. "No, son," I said. "This is me, the version you've been stepping over for years. You just never looked close enough." He looked down at the paper again, the one with his name printed neatly under the words "Notice of Termination of Occupancy." "You can't mean this," he said quietly. "I do, and where are we supposed to go?" "That's not my problem," I said simply. "You made your own choices, now live with them." He sighed, defeated. "Mom, please." I shook my head gently. "I don't owe you explanations anymore, Greg. I owe myself peace." The words hung in the air like a bell that refused to stop ringing. I turned, walking toward the hallway, my steps slow but deliberate. At the doorway, I paused and looked back once. "You have 30 days, I repeated softly. "Make them count." Neither spoke, neither moved. I closed the door behind me, the latch clicking quietly, like punctuation on a sentence that had been waiting 40 years to end. I walked into the living room, sat down, and exhaled, no shaking. No tears, just stillness. The kind of stillness that finally feels like ownership. You know, power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through the sound of a door closing behind people who thought they'd never have to leave. If this story feels like justice finally breathing, subscribe. Because what comes next isn't anger, it's freedom learning how to smile again. As I sat there, the scent of garlic and regret filled the air. I could hear their hushed voices in the kitchen, shock, panic, disbelief. I almost laughed, ha ha ha. Not out of cruelty, but out of relief. They had spent years deciding what I deserved. Now, I decided what they didn't. I looked at Harold's photo on the wall, his calm eyes watching me. Be proud of me, I whispered. I remembered whose name is on the deed. The clock ticked softly in the corner. Every second felt like a small reclaiming. My house was quiet again, but this time the silence belonged to me. They thought they could outtalk me. But when the law speaks for you, silence becomes the loudest sound in the room. The morning after I gave them the notice, the house didn't feel like mine yet, but it didn't feel like theirs anymore either. You ever wake up and realize the air itself has changed? Like even the walls are holding their breath. That's how it was. Quiet, too quiet, but not the weak kind of quiet. The steady kind, the kind that means control has shifted. I woke up early before sunrise. Old habits, you know. I boiled water for tea the way I always had. The kettle squeaked again, still coughing like an old friend trying to wake up. I smiled faintly. We're both still here, I whispered to it, ha ha ha. My own voice sounded lighter today. As I stirred the sugar, I noticed the way the morning light crept through the curtains, slow, golden warm. It touched the corners of the kitchen table that used to feel so heavy. Not anymore. The table looked smaller, simpler, like it was finally breathing too. The clock ticked softly. The refrigerator hummed. The whole house hummed back, low and alive. Then I heard footsteps. Greg, he didn't say good morning. He just walked in, eyes half open, shoulders tense, pretending not to remember what had happened the night before. He poured coffee. The silence between us stretched like a thread about to snap. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough. We need to talk. I didn't flinch. All right. He sat down across from me, mug in hand, eyes flickering like he didn't know where to start. Mom, about the letter, the notice, I corrected gently. He sighed. Yeah, that. We can fix this. You don't need to go through with it. Things got out of hand. We were just trying to help. Help, that word again. I took a slow sip of tea, letting the steam rise between us. Greg, I said softly, what exactly do you want to fix? The notice or the way you've been treating me? He blinked, caught off guard. Mom, come on, you're taking this too far. No, I said quietly. You did, he looked down, running his hand through his hair. It wasn't supposed to go this way. We thought that I wouldn't notice, I interrupted. He stayed silent. You could hear the ticking clock louder now, as if even it was listening. Then Alana appeared in the doorway. Her hair was perfectly done, as if she thought presentation could fix everything. We should discuss logistics, she said, her voice tight but polite. If you're really serious about this eviction. I nodded slowly. I am. She exchanged a look with Greg. Fine, she said sharply. Then we'll need more than 30 days. We can't just move out overnight. You'll use the 30 you have, I said, calm, and even her jaw dropped slightly. You think that's fair? No, I said, stirring my tea. But fairness stopped being part of this house the day you threw out my quilt. For a moment, no one said a word. The sunlight moved a few inches across the floor, touching Greg's coffee cup, making the steam look like smoke rising from something burning. Alana's lips tightened. You're making a mistake, I smiled softly. Maybe. But it'll be my mistake this time. She turned to Greg. Say something. He didn't. He just stared at his mug, shoulders slumped. The boy I once raised, the one who used to bring me daisies from the yard, he was in there somewhere. But the man sitting in front of me had forgotten how to see his mother as a person. Mom, he said finally, you're not the same. I nodded. I know. I stopped pretending to be small. His eyes lifted to mine, confused. What does that mean? It means, I said, I'm done living like a guest in my own life. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was earned. I stood up, taking my teacup to the sink. My knees cracked softly, my back stiff, but I felt strong anyway. Alana crossed her arms, sighing dramatically. You'll regret this, Mary Ellen. Maybe, I said, but you'll remember it. I left them sitting there, their whispers following me like the faint hum of a dying engine. In the hallway, I paused for a moment, resting my hand on the wall. The paint was cool under my palm. I could almost feel the house breathing differently now, like it was waiting to see if I'd really go through with it. I whispered to it, don't worry. I'm not backing down. I spent the rest of the morning doing small things, watering plants, folding towels, wiping down the shelves. Nothing dramatic, just quiet reclaiming. Each little act felt like saying I'm still here. The rhythm of it was comforting. Fold, breathe, remember. Every time I passed their room, I could hear them talking in low voices. Words like unfair, crazy, lawyer. I smiled to myself, sigh. Let them talk, I murmured. I've already done my talking. Around noon, I stepped out onto the porch. The sun was warm, the air crisp. I could hear birds somewhere near Harold's old hydrangea bush. It was blooming again, stubborn thing. It had survived drought, cold, neglect, and yet here it was, alive and beautiful. I sat down on the porch chair, wrapped my shawl around my shoulders, and looked out at the street. Kids rode bicycles. A delivery truck rumbled past. The world kept spinning, and for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't spinning with it. I was standing still, grounded. Inside, their voices rose again, sharper this time. Let them argue. That's what happens when people who have been comfortable too long realize the floor beneath them belongs to someone else. I closed my eyes, let the sun touch my face, and whispered, "You were right, Harold. Sometimes quiet is the loudest way to win." The breeze carried his name back to me, soft and sweet. I smiled. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, hit subscribe. Because some stories aren't about revenge, they're about remembering your worth. That night I slept better than I had in weeks, not because everything was fixed, but because the silence finally belonged to me again. When I woke, the house was still no clinking dishes. No footsteps rushing through the hallway, just peace, that fragile, beautiful kind of peace that comes when you stop explaining yourself to people who never listened. I sat up, smiled at the morning light, and whispered, "Let's start rebuilding." They were packing fear. I was unpacking freedom. You ever walk past a door you're scared to open, not because of what's inside, but because of what's not? That's how I felt every morning walking past my old room, 4 days. 4 mornings, each time I paused at the door, hand hovering over the knob, then walked away, but on the 5th morning, something in me shifted. Maybe it was the way sunlight hit the hallway floor, or maybe it was the way the house finally felt like it was breathing again. Whatever it was time. I took a deep breath, wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders, and turned the knob. The door creaked open slowly, the sound soft but familiar, and there it was. The room. Bare, quiet, hollow, but this time it didn't hurt. It didn't feel like a grave anymore. It felt like a blank page. I stepped inside. My shoes tapped gently against the floor. The sunlight poured through the window, landing on the same spot where my bed used to be. I knelt down, letting my fingers brush the floor. The wood was cool but steady, like it was waiting for me to claim it again. I smiled, half to myself, half to Harold. "You know, love," I whispered, "they thought they took everything, but they forgot I'm still here." I stood up slowly, joints protesting a little. "Oh, ha ha ha." Even my knees are surprised I came back. I ran my fingers along the wall. "We'll fix this, you and me," I said softly, "one piece at a time." That afternoon, I walked to the small furniture shop down on Main Street. Mr. Delaney, the owner, looked up from behind the counter. His face lit up. "Mary Ellen. Haven't seen you in a while." I smiled. "I need a few things, something simple, nothing too fancy." He chuckled. "Simple's the best kind, ma'am. You looking for a full set?" "Just a bed," I said, "and maybe a chair, something sturdy." "I'm done with fragile things." We walked through the rows of furniture and I tried a few mattresses, too soft, too high, too fancy. Then I found one medium firm, plain, reliable. It reminded me of the one Harold insisted we buy when we first moved in. I pressed my hand against it and whispered, "You'll do." Mr. Delaney grinned. "You've still got good taste." I laughed lightly. "I'm rebuilding an empire, one room at a time." When I left the shop, my receipt tucked in my purse, I felt lighter. The sky even looked brighter. Funny how small decisions, ones we should have made long ago, can feel like freedom stitched into action. 2 days later, the delivery truck pulled up. Greg was home, sitting in the living room pretending to work. Pretending not to see, I opened the door for the workers myself. "Bedrooms down the hall," I said, voice steady. They nodded and carried the furniture in: new bed frame, mattress, 2 nightstands, 1 chair, the sound of footsteps, wood against floor. Tools clicking, it was like music reclaiming music. When they finished, the room didn't look full, but it didn't look empty anymore either. I walked in slowly, trailing my fingers across the smooth, new surface of the bed. The wood was light, clean, without history, but ready for one. I sat down on the edge of it. No sinking, no wobbling, just steady support. The kind I'd been giving others for years. I reached for the new quilt I'd bought, a soft blue one, simple stitching, nothing fancy. I unfolded it slowly and spread it across the bed. The fabric smelled like new cotton and hope. As I tucked the corners, my throat tightened a little. Sigh. "No holes, no dust, no history," I murmured. "Guess that means no one gets to throw this one away but me." When I finished, I turned on the small amber lamp on the nightstand. Its light was soft and warm, filling the room with a gentle glow. I sat back, watching the light dance on the wall. For the first time in months, the room looked like it belonged to me again, not because of what was inside, but because of who was standing in it. That evening, Greg came to the doorway. He didn't knock. He just stood there, hands in pockets, eyes flickering between me and the bed. "So," he said quietly, "you really went and bought everything new?" I smiled. "Yes." He nodded slowly, trying to find something to say. "It looks nice, thank you," I said. He hesitated, rubbing his neck. "Mom, you're really going through with this, huh?" "I already have," I replied gently. "You're just catching up." He looked down at the floor, shame hovering between us. "We didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said softly, "but you did." He swallowed hard. "I thought I was helping." I smiled faintly. "You were helping yourself, Greg. You just called it love so you wouldn't have to feel guilty." He winced. I didn't mean to hurt him, but sometimes truth needs to sting before it heals. I looked around the room, letting the soft lamplight reflect in my eyes. You see this, I said quietly. This isn't about furniture. This is about remembering who I am. He nodded once slowly. I get that. I hope you do, I said, because respect isn't something you inherit, Greg, you earn it. He stepped back, voice low. You've changed. I smiled. No. I just stopped apologizing for existing. He didn't answer. He just turned and walked away. The sound of his footsteps faded down the hallway. I sat there, listening to the house breathe again, this time to my rhythm. If this story makes your heart whisper, I'm still here, then subscribe. Because this isn't just a story, it's a reminder for every person who's ever had to rebuild themselves quietly. Later that night, I lay on my new bed. The sheets were cool, the pillow soft. The silence around me, gentle. It wasn't the same as before, it was better. Because now, every inch of this peace was earned. I looked up at the ceiling, smiled, and whispered, "We did it, Harold." We took it back, then I laughed softly, through tears I didn't bother to hide. Ha ha ha, took me 74 years to finally feel like the queen of my own castle. I turned off the lamp, and for the first time in a long time, the dark didn't scare me. It felt like restrial rest. They took my bed to make space for themselves. I rebuilt it to make space for my strength. You ever watch someone pack their things, not just their clothes or furniture, but their pride? It's strange how quiet people get when they realize they're leaving something they once treated like theirs. It was the 27th day since I handed them the notice. The countdown had been silent, polite, and precise. Every morning I marked an X on the small calendar by my kitchen wall. Each mark felt lighter than the last. By the last week, the whispers had started. Greg and Alana spoke in low voices behind closed doors, words half swallowed by the walls. I didn't need to hear the details. I already knew what fear sounded like. It used to live in me. The morning of their departure, the house smelled different: boxes, tape, perfume, dust. The scent of leaving. I stood in the hallway, leaning on my cane, watching them move around. No shouting, no drama, just quiet panic disguised as efficiency. Greg carried boxes down the steps, sweat on his forehead, guilt in his eyes. Alana folded clothes too quickly, her movements sharp and jerky, like the faster she packed, the less time she'd have to feel. Careful with the vase, I said softly. As Greg passed the living room, he froze for a second. Right, sorry, it's fine, I said, sipping my tea. It's just that vase has been here longer than you. He forced a weak smile, then kept walking. They'd stopped arguing with me days ago. That was the first sign they'd truly accepted the truth. This house didn't belong to them anymore. Maybe it never did. As I watched Alana tape up another box, I noticed how restless she looked. Her perfectly painted nails struggled with the tape dispenser, her lips pressed tight. Finally, she spoke, her tone clipped. I hope you're happy now. I looked up from my teacup. Calm. I'm not happy, I said quietly. I'm free. There's a difference, she scoffed. You think this is freedom? Living alone at your age, you'll regret this, Mary Ellen. I smiled faintly. Maybe, but I'd rather regret solitude than endure disrespect. Greg walked back in, wiping his hands. Alana, enough, she turned sharply. No, she needs to hear this. I've heard enough, I said softly, cutting her off. More than enough, actually. I looked around the room, bare spots on the wall, furniture shifted, boxes stacked like small farewells. For a moment it almost made me sad, not for what I lost, but for what they never appreciated. You know, I said gently, there was a time I would have done anything for your comfort. Now I realize that was my mistake. I gave you comfort without boundaries, Greg sighed, running his hand over his face. Mom, please don't turn this into a lecture. Oh, don't worry, I said. I'm done teaching, the lesson's already over. He looked down at the floor. We didn't mean for it to get this far. I know, I said. That's the problem. You never mean harm, you just cause it by pretending not to see. The silence that followed was heavy. Even the house seemed to listen. A small thud broke the stillness, Alana dropping a picture frame. It hit the ground, the glass cracking neatly across Harold's smile. I bent slowly to pick it up before she could. My hands trembled, not from weakness but from memory. Leave it, I said softly. I'll fix it. She nodded stiffly, avoiding my eyes. As I wiped the broken glass later, I whispered, Don't worry, Harold. I'm finally keeping our home safe. Hours passed, the boxes piled higher and the rooms grew emptier. Yet somehow the house felt fuller, like it had been waiting for this clearing, this release. By late afternoon, the moving truck arrived. Greg stood at the door, turning back one last time. His face looked older, tired, almost fragile. Mom, he said, voice low, I never wanted this. I met his gaze. Then you shouldn't have started it. He nodded slowly, shame flickering across his features. I'll call you once we're settled. I know you will, I said, and when you do, I'll answer, but not as the woman who lets you walk over her, as the woman who taught you what it means to own something and mean it. He swallowed hard. I'll do better, I hope so, I said. For your sake. Alana didn't say goodbye. She just brushed past me, her perfume leaving a trail that disappeared before the door even shut. And then they were gone. I stood there, watching the truck pull away until it turned the corner and vanished. For a long time, I didn't move. The silence pressed around me, not heavy, not lonely, just real. I turned slowly, letting my eyes travel across the room. The furniture sat where it belonged. The walls looked brighter. The floor gleamed in the afternoon sun. It felt like the house had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. I took a deep breath myself. It's just us now, I whispered to the walls, to Harold, to myself. No anger, no guilt. Just peace. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, sat by the window, and watched the sun set behind the hydrangea bush. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, quiet colors, gentle ones. For the first time in years, I didn't have to shrink myself to fit into my own home. I could sit however I wanted. Walk wherever I wanted, breathe however I wanted. You ever realize freedom doesn't always come with fireworks? Sometimes it comes with the sound of a door closing softly behind people who never deserved to walk through it in the first place. I smiled at the thought. Goodbye, chaos, I whispered. Welcome home, peace. If this story made you feel that quiet kind of strength, subscribe, because sometimes standing up for yourself isn't loud, it's steady. As the night settled in, I turned off the lights one by one. Each switch clicked softly, marking the end of something small but significant. When I reached my bedroom door, I paused again. Only this time I smiled, no fear, no hesitation. Just gratitude. I turned off the lamp, climbed into bed, and whispered into the dark, "We did it, Harold, they're gone." And for the first time in years, I fell asleep before midnight with no noise, no footsteps, no guilt, just silence, beautiful, rightful silence. They left behind silence, and I filled it with dignity. You ever walk through a place so familiar it feels like it's breathing with you? That's how my house felt the morning after they left, alive again. Not loud, not busy, just quietly awake. The floors creaked when I stepped on them, but it wasn't complaining anymore. It was greeting me. The curtains swayed with the breeze like they were whispering, "Welcome home." Even the air smelled different, lighter, calmer, free. I walked slowly from room to room, bare feet touching the cool floorboards. Every corner told a story. Every wall remembered something. The kitchen still smelled faintly of coffee and lemon. The living room, with its old couch and slightly crooked lamp, looked exactly the way Harold liked it, and my bedroom, oh, my bedroom, was perfect. The bed neatly made, the soft blue quilt folded just right. A gentle sunbeam fell across the pillow like a blessing. I stood in the doorway, letting it all sink in. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of presence, of memory of me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen by the very walls that once held my tears. I sat down at the edge of the bed, smiling softly. "You remember, don't you?" I whispered to the house. All of it. It did. The laughter, the fights, the long nights waiting for Harold to come home from work, the birthdays, the storms, the quiet mornings with tea and radio static. The house had seen it all, and somehow it forgave me for letting strangers forget its story. Later that afternoon, I opened the window. The breeze carried the faint smell of garden soil and lilacs. Harold's hydrangea bush was blooming again, stubborn, strong, beautiful. I chuckled. "You really are just like me, aren't you? Always coming back, no matter who tries to cut you down." I leaned against the window frame, breathing it all in. You ever notice how healing doesn't come with noise? It comes in small moments, folding a quilt, wiping a counter, hearing a floor creak under your own steps again. Healing sounds like home reclaiming your heartbeat. For years, I thought forgiveness meant letting things slide. Now I understood forgiveness just means freeing yourself from the weight of remembering wrongs too long. I didn't hate Greg or Alana. I pitied them. Because one day, they'd realize they didn't just lose a house, they lost a woman who would have done anything for them. I sat down at the dining table and opened my old leather notebook. The same one that started all this. The ink was fading, the corners soft, the pages almost falling out, but it still held my life. I flipped to the last page and wrote slowly, "It's not too late to take back what's yours. Peace. Respect home names you." Then underneath I added, "Silence is not weakness, it's a warning." I closed the notebook and pressed my palm on the cover for a long moment, breathing deeply. Sigh. It felt like closure. In the evening, I made tea, the real kind, loose leaves steeped slowly. I carried my cup to the porch and sat on Harold's old chair, freshly painted and fixed. The wood creaked softly beneath me, and I laughed. Still holding up, old man. The street was quiet. Neighbors passed by, waving politely. Mrs. Green from next door called out, "Everything all right, Mary Ellen?" "Haven't seen your son lately." I smiled warmly. "Everything's perfect, dear, just making room for peace," she chuckled. "Ah, peace, that's the rarest kind of company these days." "Indeed," I said. "And the best kind." As the sun dipped below the trees, the sky turned shades of orange and rose, the same colors Harold loved. I closed my eyes and felt his presence in the soft hum of evening. "Be proud of me," I whispered. I finally stopped trying to be everyone's comfort, and then I laughed through a small tear. "Ha ha ha. About time, right? If this story made you feel something, maybe a bit of strength, maybe a bit of peace, hit subscribe. Because sometimes stories aren't just told to entertain, they're told to remind you who you are." When the stars began to peek out, I went back inside. I turned off the lights one by one, pausing in each room like saying goodbye to an old version of myself. In the living room, I stopped by Harold's photo. I traced the edge of the frame with my thumb. "We made it through," I whispered. "You'd laugh if you saw me now." The woman who couldn't even scold her son turned into someone who served him a legal notice. I smiled. Guess you rubbed off on me more than I realized. Before going to bed, I looked around the house one last time. Everything was quiet, but this time it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. That kind of peace that doesn't ask for permission, it just arrives and stays. I climbed into bed, pulled the quilt up to my chin, and whispered one last thought before sleep. Privacy isn't selfish, it's sacred. The clock ticked softly. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves. Inside, the house finally rested with me, and in that moment, I realized something deeper. The house didn't just belong to me. It remembered me. It had been waiting all along for me to remember myself. If you've ever been silenced, overlooked, or made to feel small in your own space, remember this: you are allowed to take back what's yours. Your peace, your home, your voice. So if this story touched something inside you, subscribe, not just for more stories, but for reminders like this one, because sometimes it takes losing everything to find yourself again. They thought they took my comfort, but all they did was wake up my courage, and this house will never forget who it belongs to again.